Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
So today we're digging into something maybe a little unexpected as a language learning tool, copywriting.
Right. Not the first thing that usually springs to mind for learning English.
Exactly. But if you're keen on really getting a solid, efficient grasp of how English works, well, stick with us.
We've looked at some material on this, and it turns out there are some pretty compelling benefits. We've kind of boiled it down to 5 key things.
5 key ways that actually doing copywriting can seriously boost your English.
Yeah, it's interesting how something that seems quite mechanical, just copying words, can actually unlock, deeper understanding.
Those aha moments you mentioned.
Precisely. So let's get into it.
Okay, first up, word order. This feels foundational.
Absolutely fundamental in English.
Our sources really stressed how critical word order is. It's not like some other languages, Korean was mentioned.
Right, where you might have more flexibility with sentence structure. That can really trip learners up.
Definitely. In English, swapping words around can completely change the meaning or just make it nonsense.
Exactly. And copywriting forces you to pay attention to that. You have to follow the order the native speaker used.
So by copying those sentences over and over,
You're basically training your brain. You start to internalize the natural flow, the correct structure. It becomes more intuitive, less like solving a puzzle each time.
you just get a feel for it. Which leads nicely into the next point, doesn't it? Collocations.
Ah, yes. Or as one source called them, word buddies.
I like that. Word buddies.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
about words that just naturally go together in English.
Like, verbs and nouns or adverbs and verbs that seem to be paired up often.
Heavy rain, not strong rain.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Native speakers use them without thinking.
And when you're copywriting, these pairings just jump out at you, don't they?
They really do. You see them repeatedly. And that repetition helps you develop that natural sense of what sounds right.
Yeah.
It makes your own English sound less, well, forced.
Less translated. Which brings us to point 3, thinking in English.
This is a big one. That common trap of translating word for word directly from your native language.
Yeah, the source mentioned Konglish as an example of when that happens between Korean and English. It sounds off.
It does. Because you're not thinking in the target language's structure. Copywriting, though, it sort of forces you to.
How so?
Well, you're dealing with a complete, correct English sentence. You have to slow down, process it as a whole unit.
Or just word.
Exactly. You engage with the meaning constructed in English. And even if there's a word you don't know, the surrounding sentence, the correct structure, it encourages you to keep thinking in English to figure it out, rather than immediately switching back to translate.
Right, I see. You're accepting English on its own terms, kind of.
That's a good way to put it.
Now, what about actually using the language? Copywriting seems so passive, just input, right? Reading and writing it down.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the argument is it's actually a form of output practice, too. Low-pressure output.
How does that work? Output.
Think about it. When you carefully copy a sentence and you understand it, you're essentially storing it, encoding it.
Like putting a tool in your toolbox.
Precisely. Becomes a pattern, a structure that's ready for you to pull out later when you're speaking or writing yourself.
So you're practicing the shape of the language without the pressure of having to come up with it all from scratch?
Exactly. The structure, the vocabulary is provided. You just focus on absorbing and internalizing it for later use.
Makes sense. And the final point ties into this, doesn't it? Memory and retention.
It really does. It's
Yeah.
almost like a side effect, a bonus.
You mean you end up memorizing the stuff you copy?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
But often without trying to memorize it, which is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah.
Just through the sheer repetition of writing out these correct sentences. The patterns, the word order, the collocations, the way thoughts are structured in English, they just start to stick.
So it becomes ingrained knowledge.
Right. You're reinforcing all those elements we talked about: word order, word buddies, thinking in English passively, almost effortlessly. It avoids that feeling of having to cram vocabulary lists or grammar rules.
Which can be pretty daunting for learners.
Absolutely. This feels more organic.
Okay, so let's quickly recap those 5 points. Practicing copywriting helps you get a handle on correct English word order.
Makes you notice those natural word buddies or collocations.
Pushes you towards actually thinking in English rather than translating.
Gives you a low-pressure way to practice output, storing patterns for later use.
And boosts your memory and retention of all these things almost without you realizing it.
Exactly. It's quite a package of benefits from a simple activity.
It really is.
So maybe a final thought for you listening is to consider this. How could just consistently engaging with well-formed English sentences through this focused act of copying fit into your own learning?
It's about that deliberate, steady exposure, isn't it?
Yeah. Leading, over time, to a much more natural, intuitive grasp of the language. Something to think about.